Now we confirm that my audio and video are coming clearly to you.
Yes, it is. Oh, there.
Awesome. Thank you. You're welcome to another session of the FM Lunch Hour. My name is Paul Erubami. I'm the CEO of Max-Migold Limited and the head of faculty of the Max-Migold Training Center. As is our usual program for Thursdays afternoons like this, we're coming with another interesting topic on the FM Launch Hour, Facilities for the Future, Designing Buildings for Climate Resilience. There has been a lot of talk about green buildings, smart buildings, energy efficient buildings, and so on and so forth. But all of this comes together to address one central issue. The earth is evolving. Resources are going to become leaner and leaner. The demand for all of these resources are going to be increasing as populations expand or enlarge or increase. There are going to be a lot more of negative occurrences, global warming, harsh climatic extremes, and so on and so forth. We need to start thinking of how to repurpose our existing buildings to be able to survive the existence that we are stepping into, and also begin to make strategic inputs into the development process for fresh or brand new construction so that we can make better choices that would make these buildings more, comfortable, convenient, productive for the end users as the world evolves. Okay, so that's basically the summary of what we want to be learning in this hour, this lunch hour. And before I dive straight into this, I would like to remind all of our audience that the FM Mastercraft Diploma, the flagship professional training program for facility managers in Africa, is starting another batch. The batch 25 will be starting in August. So we just have 1 month to recruit into this class. This program over the last 8 years has produced trained facility managers who are holding it down in virtually all organizations where facility managers, professional facility managers are employed. So if you think about any organization in any sector, oil and gas, banking, finance, medical, hospitals, retail, estate, residential estates, if you think about those who are actually managing facilities, large portfolios across these sectors in Nigeria today, you will find at least 1 in every 3 who have gone through the FM Mastercraft Diploma and are doing so well with their careers where they are. So far, we have trained about 1,000 people who are all placed and rising very fast in their careers. The opportunity is open again for those who have been, some of us have been, dragging our feet for the last couple of years. I don't think you should do that anymore because the minimum wage for trained facility managers from our program is 200,000 naira. And most are already rising past 500,000 to 1 million and even more within 2 years of completing the program. I don't see why you should remain stuck in your role, in your job without growth or promotion because you're not adding strategic value. So nobody's going to pay you more. So if you really want to start adding strategic value, you need to learn the processes, the procedures, and the way to think and change the way you see the world and the services you provide so that you can begin to demand. Because by the time you start giving more value, you begin to attract more accolades, commendations, and begin to see demand for your service rise to the point where you would have to turn down some offers because your demand will be rising. So this is a program that you don't want to joke with. Talk to all those who have gone through the program with us. We can tell you about 97% of them are happy they did, are doing very well in their careers, and we happily recommend it. If you speak with them, they can eagerly tell you about their careers, how the shift, the changes that happened in the last 2 to 5 years of most of them taking this program. You can go to our YouTube channel, Max-Migold YouTube channel, and you'll see, hundreds of testimonials from people who have gone through our program to know that this is a program that has 100% social proof of value for the end users. Okay, so as we count down to August, when we start the next batch, I look forward to having all of you enroll. And if you have organizations with teams, people who are in your employment, and you're basically struggling to get them to come up in terms of strategic positioning and high-level delivery, I'm sure you don't want to waste time. Sponsor them on the program, and you will see the big difference in the work they do within just a few weeks of starting the program. I'm not talking about finishing the program, just starting. You'll see the impact immediately. So go to maxmigold.com/promo, go to our YouTube channel, go to our Facebook channel page. We have a page on LinkedIn, Instagram. We have a group in WhatsApp, Max-Migold Facility Management Training Group. We have a group in Telegram, FM Services and Facility Management Training in Telegram, and also the same thing on Facebook. So wherever you search for Max-Migold, we are the front runners in professional development in facility management in Nigeria and Africa. And when it comes to day-to-day delivering on the promise of facility management, professional facility management, Max-Migold is also at the forefront of this. We have clients who have engaged us to manage operations and maintenance, asset registers and asset tagging, energy efficiency, smart building deployment, software for facility management, training, recruitment in-house. So even if you don't have to go through a 3-month program and the FM diploma, we can bring a training to your site and your team wherever you are on the continent of Africa. So we're very much available to solve all kinds of problems. If you are a developer, a construction company, and you need superior advice on operational readiness, sustainability, from experts, consultants, while you are doing your design, all the way to construction and delivery of the project, you need someone from Max-Migold on your team as a consultant, so that we can advise you on the necessary changes or adjustments that will help you reduce overall long-term costs, improve sustainability, and increase operational readiness for your end users. You will have people buying into your project who are happy they did, and will be referring their friends to come and buy more into your project because they know that you have thought carefully about them using the minds from consultants you hired from Max-Migold Limited. Okay, so let's talk about facilities for the future. Our topic for today, designing buildings for climate resilience. Learn how to prepare facilities to withstand climate extremes, flooding, heat waves, power outages, and the role of FM disaster preparedness. If you've been following the news, you'll see that this month of July that we just entered, in fact, started all the way from June, countries in Europe and other parts of the world have been battling extreme heat waves. People are jumping into pools and drainages and all kinds of rivers just to cool off, right? That's because they didn't expect this kind of heat at this time of going. While that's happening, there are wildfires taking over certain other cities. There are floods in Nigeria. 2 recent floods in the last 1 month has claimed close to 400 lives, and this is not necessarily isolated, because the water bodies are rising, the dams are not able to hold them, and then that is becoming catastrophic in terms of disaster. And in Lagos and other, coastal cities across the country, you find whole streets being submerged, estates, suddenly coming under the pressure of flooding. And the consideration is, so what could we have done better? What could we have done differently? Because at the point when you now begin to suffer some of these harsh climatic impacts, you are left with fewer choices. You're thinking, and this is you as a facility manager, having this burden to deal with. So part of what we're going to talk about today is how you can navigate this challenge of already existing facilities struggling to cope with the effects or impact of climate and being able to manage our services in such a way that we reduce negative impact on our users and owners. And then when you are part of a new development, if you lucky enough to have been invited to participate in construction project site meetings, design review conversations, what will you be contributing? Do you understand enough of sustainability considerations, operational readiness considerations, green effects and the impacts of global warming and climatic conditions on the buildings that we are having today? I'll give you a typical example. We had a property being developed in Oniru, and I mean, the engineers have done all their work, fantastic work. They've designed, they built, and that road did not have a public drain, right? But for a site that big, there will be need for stormwater runoff because you've built structures in the place and you have, when rain falls, the water will, flow around and needs to go somewhere. And the engineers have installed some perforated pipes, something under the road that when the stormwater comes in, it goes into a small drain within the compound and it percolates into the road paved areas or just around the surrounding. What they did not calculate or did not realize is with increased global warming, the water table keeps rising. So in essence, where you have a certain solid ground that you expect to be able to absorb your runoff water, into itself, is already saturated even before the rain comes. So where will your own stormwater go to, right? So that can become a big challenge for that site. So imagine they finish building it and without any such input from a facility manager who understands how sometimes these designs work for a few years and later becomes a problem, right? Some people have built some septic tanks and tanks to receive sewage, only for them to realize that groundwater is filling up into that tank and it's filling up within a month. So if you're evacuating, how many trips can you afford as part of the operations and maintenance? So some of these things are things we have experienced as facility managers. These are things we know will become a problem because of the impacts of the environment on our buildings. So how can we now guide designers and engineers with that knowledge, that long-term view, that life cycle view of how degradation happens and how changes take place within a site or facility that can help them design for something more resilient? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't help anybody to have a property built, works fine for a couple of years and start having issues. In some cases, issues that are even beyond fixing. People are about to abandon whole buildings just because, they just discovered that the environmental issues are beyond what can be fixed economically. So the best thing is just to abandon the building and let it go down, or even bring it down completely and start afresh. We don't want that to happen. We don't want people, owners, investing in properties that we are managing and they are not able to get the right kind of returns in terms of, high paying tenants and all that because of environmental factors. So in this session, you're going to understand, learning the concept of climate resilience and the relevance, its relevance in facility design. We'll talk about climate-related risks and vulnerabilities that affect facility operations. You are going to be the one managing the facility into the future, so you must know what kind of risks to look out for. And at this point, if you are lucky to be in the design phase as a consultant or as an in-house FM, participating, you need to have an open mind to understand some of the things that will come to pass with you if you're operating and maintaining that site. So knowing them ahead of time helps you to put the right inputs that can guide the minds and decisions of those who are designing. Explore innovative design strategies for climate resilient buildings. Learn how to integrate sustainability, adaptability, and resilience into FM planning. And this includes your operations and maintenance plans. We were talking a little bit about some of those, green building standards that exist all over the world. And there's been an overly emphasized importance of how to design for, how to build for. But when it comes to the operations and maintenance aspects, there seems to be a gap. There's very little regarding sustainable, operationally ready, resilient FM operations. So we will be thinking through some of these and make that input. And then climate resilient principles, that we can apply to facility management scenarios. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So let's start with basic definitions. What's climate resilience? The building's ability to withstand and adapt to climate-related risk. The building's ability to withstand and adapt to climate-related risk. Recently, this year alone, I've seen around this vicinity, so many buildings brought down. And I've done some kind of analysis on why buildings become distressed and have to be brought down. One would expect that the older buildings are the ones that should become distressed and be brought down. But analysis have found that some buildings built less than 15, 20 years ago are coming down, whereas buildings that were built 30, 40 years ago are still standing, right? So what is the difference, right? It's the fact that when some buildings were built, they were not thinking about, climate-related risk. They're not thinking about, flooding, dealing with levels. They were not thinking about, excessive moisture, excessive heat in some areas. And in some instances, the groundwater rising because of increased humidity can lead to more pressure on foundations of buildings that can actually bring down the building, or at least create structural defects that now result in the need to bring down the building. And then when we now take over the buildings and we're now managing them, we now have to start dealing with costly repairs. Think about it. When a building gets soaked up by rising down, for example, the first thing to think about is some structural solutions, underpinning to create certain arbitrary or artificial mechanisms to support the structure so you don't have to bring it down. These are all medicine after death, right? In some cases, you have to deal with rust, extreme corrosion. In some cases, you have to deal with, entire walls being completely soaked and remaining permanently humid and damp. And then you have to have, the humidifiers, you have to have ACs on all the time. You have to have all kinds of solutions to keep the place livable. This makes the operations and maintenance and repairs of those places more expensive because certain things were not done to forestall or to prevent this kind of impact from climate-related disruptions. The same thing, happens when you have buildings that are wired up with not adequate, fire fire protection, not adequate lightning arrests, and earthing, you definitely suffer some serious breakdowns, shocks, and even serious accidents before you start investing heavily in getting to fix or correct these things. So for us as facility manager, we want to be the ones that are the sustainability champions. If we don't do this job well now, if we don't make this contribution now, we'll still end up with the sick buildings that we're managing and the ineffective approaches they were adopting for its operations and maintenance. And it will fall back to us, telling us that we're incompetent, we cannot handle things that we've been given to manage, right? So it's best we learn sustainability, we learn all of those impacts that can make us look as if we don't know what we're doing in the future now, so we can make this contribution. And this is something I want to speak to regarding the upcoming Facility Innovation Summit that the Max-Migold Training Center alumni is putting together for August 30. I want to recommend, that conference to everyone. Issues like these are going to be analyzed, and you're going to learn a lot if you attend such conferences. Similar topics are going to be coming up in the AFMPN, the Association of Facility Management Practitioners conference coming up in October, to also highlight the impacts of sustainability into facility management operations going into the future. Our goal in bringing you this session, in introducing it and including our training packages and bringing it to you in conferences is the world is going through a turning point now. Climate impact is going to be increasing. It's no longer going to be business as usual. We cannot keep building the way we were building before. We cannot keep managing the way we were managing before, because we want to ensure that long-term value is achieved and operational continuity for our clients and users is also achieved. Those are our key goals. The business and the people must benefit from the knowledge that we're sharing from amongst our team and our profession. So let's talk about the challenges. What's the reality right now? Temperatures are rising. Temperatures are rising. People who didn't think they would need air conditioning are basically running a escalator now to find air conditioning because the heat threshold has increased beyond what they expect. Even for the rest of us who are used to heat, the average annual rise of temperature is now 1.5 degrees Celsius, which means if you have a high of 23 this day last year, by this day, you are going to have 24.5 as a high. And then by next year, this time it will be 26 or 25.5. So the typical temperatures that we are used to are increasing. It might be subtle, it might be little, but that little impact, that increased temperature is affecting our air conditioning. The air conditioning system is tuned to provide us cooling to a certain temperature. That's what it's tuned for. It will do all it can to achieve that, right? So now what that means is that it needs to overcome all the heat in the atmosphere, in the environment, to take us down to the temperature that we need to be productive and healthy, right? And so it will do a lot more work. And then your cost of maintaining the air conditioning, the cost of energy for the air conditioning system will also increase. Even if you don't use the air conditioning system, if you have to turn your fan from number 1 to number 2 to number 3 to number 4, increasing the speed to maintain a certain speed of flow of air to give you a certain temperature, you will spend more as you increase the speed. So energy consumption, strain on the air conditioning system, increased cost of maintenance are things we need to deal with because of rising temperatures. And then we now have that accompanied by heavy rainfall, right? Every year you hear state governments announce certain areas, people should evacuate from the areas. When I hear those announcements, I used to wonder, so if you tell 9 local governments in the state, for example, oh, you're going to have excessive rainfall this year, you all have to find a way to get out of there. where should they go to? Where should they go to be honest, right? So now we are beginning to see that pattern get worse. So what should you do to ensure that before buildings or certain areas become built up and populated, what should you do? Have proper drainage systems. Have certain elevations established for every building that's going to be built to be able to drain by gravity out of that area into a natural water body that should not be too far away, right? So all of this requires both a municipal and individual investors, working together to collaborate on how to manage how this flooding will happen. Rivers are beginning to break their banks, right? Which means you will suddenly see a river that was, probably just 20, 30 feet wide. And from year to year to year, nobody sees anything significant about the river. All of a sudden, one rain falls, and the river just swells 30 feet across on both ends, and the water gushes into residential areas because nobody's been thinking about how that river is increasing in volume from year to year and how that would affect adjoining lands and properties. So we need to be very conscious of this. So as facility managers, when we are part of any building construction, the thinking should always be there will be storm runoff water. Where will it go? How high should we stay to be able to be free from the flooding? Even if you are free from the flooding because you've stayed high or started your foundation from a high level, you still need to have access to your site. How will you handle that? Those considerations need to happen. And then how will the site be properly drained? Should all be done before we even set the first brick to build that property. And when I talk about buildings that have been brought down, increased humidity and high water table is affecting foundations. So structural integrity is being, impacted. As facility managers, one thing you can do on a regular basis is do structural analysis of your facility at least every 5 years. At least every 5 years, do a structural test of your building so that you don't fall victim to one of those buildings that just suddenly collapses. Drought conditions impact water availability for operations and landscaping, and this is something that I find a bit ironic. Rising temperatures leads to both increased the humidity and rainfall in some areas and increased desertification. So when we hear about one of the reasons that have been adduced in Nigeria, for example, for farmer header crisis is the fact that deserts are expanding. So there's no more in terms of vegetation for the cattle to graze on, and so they begin to fall down towards the rainforest more and more to get more humid or rainforest resources, grass and other life in the forest to graze their cattle up. And this can lead to conflict because the farmers are using those spaces to cultivate their crops. Now, so you see how this is a challenge. Dry areas and flooded areas. Sometimes I hear of flooding in places in the core north, and I'm wondering, so I expect that those places are supposed to be some desert. Why is the desert not increasing? And then you're not hearing of flooding, killing people in Niger, killing people in Zamfara and the rest. That's because the water volume is also increasing. Rainfall increases in some areas and droughts happen in some areas. This is a network of interconnected climatic movements. Winds that causes heat, causes moisture condensation in some other areas, and so they create different impacts. And as the temperature rises, these winds move in more erratic directions and create different impacts across locations, including storms. High winds posing risks to roofs, windows, and outdoor infrastructure. And then air quality degradation from wildfires or pollution affects occupant health and ventilation systems. And if I mean, we have been very lucky in Nigeria. We have, I would say, a small problem with flooding. A small problem with flooding. We don't have excessive wildfires, even with all the bush burning that people embark upon during the planting season. We still don't have, escalating wildfires. So we as naturally we even though we are so unprepared for extremes, we seem to be lucky that we're not having these kind of extremes. But we must be ready. We must prepare. We must have the knowledge. We must have the skills to advise on what can be done when called upon. So what are some of the threats, heat waves, floods, and storms? How can we deal with it? Site-specific risk assessment needs to happen for all of our sites. Sometimes you are in a property, imagine a property or an estate, and everything looks okay. When rain falls, the water seems to dissipate, so nobody seems to care until a certain property or land that has not been built starts being built. People start coming in there, they create a fence, they block all the ways that water has been draining into that side, nobody has been caring. The blockage, they start doing their sand filling and all that. And before you know what's happening, the area is now built up. So that last point at which has been taken like the sump of the neighborhood is now used up. Some people even go as far as a natural drain where the water collects from certain neighborhoods and flow in tiny streams and culverts. They go and narrow it down by filling the edges of it, creating an embankment and building massive structures all over the place. What's just happening is that instead of seeing those spaces as spaces that have been saving us from floods, people see it as land that they can occupy, and then they occupy it to everybody's, failure or loss at the end of the day. We must not just focus entirely on our property. We should have some kind of community, connection that helps us evaluate what's happening around our property. So you can map flood zones and drainage patterns to guide resilient design and infrastructure placement. If I want to build, I'll have to look around the entire neighborhood, see what happens, during rainy season and what happens during dry season. Even if nobody talks to me, I can see, on fences and buildings, the lines, the pattern created by floods in that area to decide, how I will build so I don't become a victim of flooding in my own site. But beyond that, I want to engage with the neighbors and local authorities to ensure that we can prevent the whole, because it doesn't help for me to have only my property not being flooded. I have to get into it anyway. And other people, in that space, once they all start doing the same thing that I've done, we all get to a new level and the effect returns again. So we need to all work together as a community. So assess the likelihood and impact of climate-related threats on the facility operations, identify critical assets and functions most vulnerable to disruptions, develop tailored migration strategies such as flood barriers, flood barriers, installation of backup power. The whole idea here is if you understand that there is a likely risk, what are you doing about it? What are you doing to reduce or mitigate the impact of that risk on your facilities operation? Picture managing a facility that is, when rain falls, it gets flooded. People can't get to the facility. If customers were supposed to come there, they'll find somewhere else to go do their business. So there'll be economic loss. If users have to navigate their way there because they have no other choice, they will expose themselves to health risk, they expose themselves to all kinds of losses just to get into the facility. And you are the facility manager. The question to you will be, how will you deal with it? So we start looking for some kind of project we can implement, dredging certain areas, clearing some drainages, building new drainages, finding paths, to evacuate the wastewater, and even buying some pumps and the rest to pump them into higher drainages or other water channels where they can go. Now, those are things we do to react. If we not get a chance to be part of a new development, we don't expect to be wanting to react. We want to be able to have the right advice, the right information to act now in ways that we will not have to react in the future. And of course, if it does happen, we have to have contingency plans. There has to be a way to manage people's safety, manage business continuity. It doesn't help to say, oh, well, something happened, there was flooding and our business shut down, right? So before that flooding, have I been able to anticipate to see that this is a possibility? What can I do to ensure that people are safe and that the business can continue one way or the other, even with that flooding? That means I anticipated it and I put some measures in place. So this is not just about the assets, it's also about the people. In fact, it's more about the people who are living in the spaces. Sometimes we think about climatic effects in terms of impact on assets, but there's more impact on the people. So let's take fires and smoke and soot from environmental factors, clogging people's lungs, itching the eyes and skin, and creating health issues. Let's talk about people locked up in spaces, for extended period of their day and night, not seeing any aspect of nature, right? All of these can create ill health and poor living conditions. And we as facility managers need to find ways to improve the well-being of individuals that we manage spaces for. So one of the ideas that has been a practice, for many years is increase the use of natural lighting and ventilation. This creates a healthier environment because you breathe in fresh air. If you get in light, get air, and natural light is better than artificial light when it comes to mental states of individuals. In addition to that, we also reduce our energy costs. Energy costs is continuing to be one of the biggest challenge with sustainability, because once subsidies are removed from energy, we start paying the full cost of energy. The reality hits that if we're not efficient, we are going to be losing a lot of the profitability revenue of the organization being wasted on energy that we could have prevented from being spent. Design building orientation and shading to minimize heat gain and enhance comfort. In architecture school, they teach us how to use orientation. So you have a site and you want to build a site. Most designers are thinking about how to maximize the number of rooms, how to maximize the building of the space to get more utility in terms of rentable square meters out of that space, forgetting that you are supposed to ensure that whoever you provide for is able to feel comfort, and that begins to give you higher value because you can charge more, you can charge a premium if you get it right. So you're no longer thinking about, you shouldn't be thinking more about quantity now, but on quality. So instead of building 10 apartments in a space where all 10 apartments are going to struggle to find air and light, I'd rather build 5 of it and make it spacious, make it airy, make it conducive. I would attract the right kind of clients, and they'll be willing to pay a premium because I designed for comfort, I designed for value, right? So orientation is a big part of that. And then layouts, when designing spaces, instead of being locked into a fixed arrangement, it's better to use modular components to adapt to changing needs. For example, you could build an office where the sockets are arranged in such a way that you can move furniture around, a bedroom where you have duplicate fitting points where you can put TVs or put beds, heads, that you can switch around, or even things that can be moved within certain extra features on the wall. So you can move a terminal or switch or socket from one point to the other without having any significant change to be made to the design. And then, of course, sustainability also expects that you think about how to reduce energy costs from air conditioning. For us, air conditioning is a big deal. For those in temperate environments, it is the heating. They need to spend money on boilers to heat up their spaces, right? Bottom line for us is we want to reduce the impact of the sun's heat. So green roofs where you put some kind of carpet grass or other kind of heat absorbing materials on the roof, reflective surfaces that bounce back the heat and light. Rainwater harvesting for added resilience, where you use rainwater for some things instead of having to borehole and pump water for virtually everything you need in facilities. They all add to reducing your impact on the environment. Because at the end of the day, if we're all smart enough to collect and reuse stormwater, we'll have less pressure on our drainage system. And we'll save a lot on the energy we use to drill and pump water from the aquifers below. And then coming to materials, building materials. Building materials and construction practices also affect sustainability. There are materials that have low impact, recyclable materials, locally sourced materials that reduce overall carbon footprint. There have been so much, research done on our local materials. We have local materials for building walls, wood panels and the rest that are sustainable instead of having them imported. Energy efficient construction techniques, thinking about how to reduce heat ingress into your property, energy efficient installations, equipment, mechanical equipment like air conditioning. People now will ask, the benefit of using an inverter air conditioning system that helps to reduce kilowatt hours consumed by the air conditioner for providing the same level of cooling because of a new technology that's built into them. Same thing that appears to be happening to the glazing industry now, right? In the past, you just put glass all over the place. It doesn't matter what kind of glass. But now people are beginning to see that when your glass can reflect very well heat and light, allow light in for daylight, you reduce your light bills and light energy consumption by your light, but also push back on the heat that comes from the sun through some creative coatings and films that are applied to the glass that make you see through and yet don't feel the heat that's outside. Your air conditioning tends to do less work. The compressor works for as long as the internal space temperature saturation has not been reached. So it keeps working and cooling and cooling and cooling. As soon as that saturation is reached, you get to the temperature, the ambient temperature that's demanded or required by the internal users. The compressor knocks off and rests. While it is resting, your kilowatt hours drops substantially because that is the main energy consumer in the air conditioning system. And then all you just be seeing is some kind of fan within the indoor fan coil unit or evaporator, just moving the air around to keep the place refreshed until such a time that heat builds up again, maybe due to activities, more people in the space, longer time spent in the space, and so on and so forth, now leads to more heat being generated. And then the temperature rises to a threshold that knocks up the compressor again to start working to cool this down. Imagine if you can have a place that is so well insulated that once it's cold, it holds that cooling for a longer period so that the compressor can rest. Imagine how much energy you can save from that process. So the choice of doors and windows and roofing sheets and ceiling boards are things that you should think, and ask questions about how insulated they are, how much heat they can allow or repel. Then construction waste. When building, when constructing, when renovating, there are a lot of construction waste that is generated, right? So it's important to think about how you can reuse as much as possible some of these materials, and how some of these materials, if they are not used or reused in your site, can be used for other purposes in other sites. So they don't end up as dump that are thrown out as trash. And when talking about green buildings, so we're talking about green building standards like LEED, BREEAM, IFC Edge, and the rest. They tend to give a stipulation of what you can do, what you can incorporate, metrics you can meet to receive their certification based on audits that they will conduct, right? But I am pitching this idea as a way to get the knowledge. So even if I don't want to certify my building to a building standard, a green building standard, it will give me some ideas that I can apply. For example, I'll pick up ideas on how to reduce my water consumption, how to meter every water that I use, how to manage my waste from that site, how to recycle and use certain waste materials, how to increase energy efficiency, metering at multiple levels, and getting monitoring data to help me make better decisions. All of these things are supposed to be what I do to qualify for certification. So, but the point here is, even if I don't want to pursue certification, I need to apply those principles to ensure that my building has minimal climatic impact or greenhouse impact. I must reduce my impact on the environment. I must reduce the environmental impact on my facility and operations that are negative impacts. So let's talk about the mechanical, electrical, plumbing aspects, the heating, HVAC, heat, ventilation, and air conditioning, power, and water. Energy efficient systems are now rampant, but the price difference might be significant. Now, so while we don't want to run our operations or our maintenance, to a loss, we need to do life cycle cost analysis, where we pick out that difference between the energy guzzling one and the energy efficient one, take that difference and compute it against how long the life cycle, how long we're going to use that asset in place, and see if we're not going to make some kind of savings. In most cases, there will be eventual savings. If you buy a normal air conditioner that is 1.5 horsepower at 400,000, and then the inverter version of that same one is 600,000, right? So this gap is clear. We can see. But I know that my kilowatt hour is 20 naira per kilowatt hour, right? And I know the power rating of the one that's not energy efficient and the one that is energy efficient, right? If I decide to, if I want to make a decision on which one to choose, purely on economic basis, I'll do my, life cycle cost analysis. I'll compute for how long that difference between the number of kilowatt hours A will consume versus what B will consume, multiplied by the hours the equipment will operate, and for the period, or what we call the useful life of that asset, I can come up with a certain number of kilowatt hours. Multiply that by the rates of purchase of 1 kilowatt hours, I can tell what the total cost will really be for the cheaper one. Because at the end of the day, I want to know what the real cost based on time value of money for option A, not energy efficient, versus option B, energy efficient. That in itself will give me enough justification to go for the energy efficient one, right? Because I need to convince management, I need to convince those who are putting down the money that I need to spend 600,000 instead of 400,000, because that's a big ask for an investor. I want to spend 400 versus 600 to provide the same cooling, right? So it's not something you can just do with your mouth and say, oh, no, this is energy efficient, we'll go for this. No, don't just do that. Do a bit of analysis. Just take out a spreadsheet, enter the data, put in the month by month, year to year cost for each of the two, compute and get to the bottom and decide, and make your recommendation of decide based on that. So there are so many systems now for taking care of virtually everything that has to do with the environment. There are sensors, smart monitoring and control for real-time performance and alerts. There are protective devices being built in to recognize spikes, variations that are irregular, and correct them. And this brings us to the world of IoT, Internet of Things, and automation. Being able to use sensors to track temperature, humidity, air quality, and water levels in real time. These are things that are now common. 10, 15 years ago, we still will probably need to construct a whole large equipment to do some of these sensing, but through devices, even online, that you can plug and play and gather information around you. And the same thing with lighting and air conditioning ventilation system. You can now set systems that recognize you have a thermal meter on the wall, a hygrometer built into a clock, for example, and that measures humidity and temperature ambience of your space. And that information is fed into a controller that is connected to your air conditioning system. You can also feed in a sensor that monitors CO2. CO2 is the air that we breathe out. We want oxygen to breathe in, right? So if CO2 is very high, it means oxygen is very low, which means I'll soon start having headaches and other mental discomforts, right? So all that information can be fed into a controlling mechanism that's been set up in the air conditioning system. The one that's responding to the CO2 levels is holding on to the fresh air intake dampers. It opens when CO2 is very high, enriches your space with fresh air, closes, and continues to monitor CO2 levels. The same thing with the ambient temperature. There's an occupancy sensor that senses that somebody's in the space, right? And this person needs to be at 23 degrees to be comfortable. Then there's a thermometer on the wall that says this place is 26 degrees, which means this human being trying to be productive here is no longer productive because he needs 23 degrees and this place is 26 degrees. That sends that information to a controller that controls either the on-off of the air conditioning system or the thermostat of that air conditioning system to, reduce the temperature so that the air, take, for example, a chilled water system that uses the compressor out there to chill the water, pumps the water into an air handling unit at a certain temperature for the air handling unit to now process it by blowing air through those fins and cooling the air that comes in at a temperature that you require, right? So if I know that if the water that comes in from the chiller is whenever it's 13 degrees, when the air handling unit processes and blows its warm air through it, and the air comes in, the space will be 19 degrees or 20 degrees. Whenever I now want a lower temperature, maybe I want a 16 degrees or 17 degrees, I know what temperature the chiller should chill the water to before pumping it into the air handling units or fan coil units that will process the air handling within the space. So those things can now be completely automated. Modern systems are now able to automate those completely, that you as an individual don't need to go look into a screen, see this and see that and take action. No. They can all be automated now using IoT and controllers. And they have predictive maintenance and energy optimization. Gone are the days where because you don't have visibility into equipment functioning, you don't know until something breaks down. Now, you can use the energy consumption data to monitor the health of an equipment. Most equipment you have in your facilities, they will tend to struggle to do more when they have an issue, when they have maybe a belt misalignment, maybe excessive vibrations from a certain pulley that is not in position or a certain bolt that is loose. They will make more noise, they will have more vibration, but in the process of all of that, more energy is being expended to produce the outputs that it requires. So just by monitoring that energy use profile, you can tell that something is wrong with the equipment. So you no longer wait for equipment to break down. So this is the age of predictive maintenance. So you can actually go fix it while it's working. Everybody knows it's working. The place is cooling, for example, for a central air conditioning system. But looking at the energy consumption, I know that it is battling something. So when people are off from the building weekends, I go check, check certain things. I can find where that problem is coming from, just because I was monitoring the energy consumption of that one equipment. Imagine if all I have in that facility is just one aggregate meter for measuring all the energy used in that space. There's no way I can do predictive maintenance and save myself and my organization from all the disruptions that can come from sudden breakdown. Okay, and now there are LED lights that can operate at different luminous intensities, color hues. A lot of changes have come into them. You can have the ones that can be coupled with an occupancy sensor now, that you don't even need to have a separate occupancy sensor. Both the light and the sensor are now one. So as you come in, it comes on, you leave, it notices that nobody is there. And these are smart systems that are being developed. Before, it was a scary thing. When you talk about technology, smarts, all of these things, they cost a lot of money, right? But now the difference is not really so much. You can get sockets now of 15,000 for the normal one, and maybe 21 or even 19,000 for the smart ones that can automate, shutdowns and save you all that energy over time. All right, so resilience requires that you're not only preventing the mishaps that the environmental impact can bring, or mitigating the impacts for those that already existing and it hits, but also ensuring that you have a means of prevention, a means of business continuity. So backups are very effective. Emergency response programs are very effective. Materials choices that can resist damage, things that can withstand corrosion, extreme corrosion, should be preferred in this day and age when choosing materials. So even if it's going to cost a little more, so that's why don't just say this is going to cost a little more, but I think it's better. Don't think. If it's going to cost a little more, that difference must be justified. That's the whole idea here. It must be justified. Management wants to be sustainable, but they don't want to lose profits in the process of being sustainable. You are not trying to sell to them that we should go out of business because we want to be sustainable, right? So you need to have an analytic mindset to be able to look at the difference in cost and justify it by talking about how long the one that's going to corrode fast, for example, will stay, how many times we're going to replace it, how much repairs we're going to do over the next 10, 50 years, compared to this one that is made of ceramic materials or PVC material, still has the same tensile strength, but will not corrode, and so on and so forth. And I have this information because I have experienced these things in the past, and I can use other benchmark studies to make inferences and put together these numbers. All right. So at the end of the day, the system, your facilities should continue running without disruption, no matter what's happening in the environment. The facility should continue giving the business the results it needs and increasing value for the investors. So we as facility managers have the ultimate goal of making sure that whoever occupies our facilities have the best of productivity and well-being. The owners and investors have the best of value and good returns on their investment. And to do this, we must be proactive. We must see all the problems well ahead and contribute ideas and plan for preventing, mitigating, and backing up or creating a business continuity arrangement that in the case of everything going wrong, we still have a way to keep ourselves alive and keep the business going. All right, so that's our session for today. I hope we've been able to pick a few points from this, and we'll become smarter when given the opportunity to contribute to facility needs, design considerations, operational readiness, sustainability within the spaces that we manage. Okay. All right, so for today's session, I'll just encourage everyone. Let me see, have we put out the links to join our WhatsApp group?
Yes, done already, sir.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Don't forget, FM Mastercraft Diploma starting in August. Please take this opportunity now and enjoy 3 months of life-changing career building and career boosting experience, and a lifelong of mentorship that makes sure you continuously earn forever because you've been part of this program. So thank you, everyone. If there are questions in any of our platforms, please. Yeah, somebody is asking for the group link, WhatsApp group link. Can you please drop it there now? Okay, let me see. Yes, I see that there. Telegram group, we have a Telegram group. I see that as well. Okay, good. So please let's join.
There's a question, sir.
Yes. Somebody is asking for the group link, WhatsApp link. Can you please drop it there now? Okay.
Abiola Miwa asked a question.
Okay, let me see what Abiola's question is. Some SEO developers don't use quality materials that can stand tests of time and environmental issues. Since for commercial, this creates a lot of issues for facility managers. How can we manage their perception and expectations? And I think this is what I've been talking about, Abiola. The developers, they care about numbers. They care about numbers. If we try to get them to spend more without doing any analysis of life cycle cost differentials between what the cheap things they are doing now and the long-term implication for end users, they will not get the message. So a developer that wants to sell a property for 200 million, for example, if you can do the numbers to show that developer that improving certain quality and and increasing your spending by extra 5 million, right, can make you sell that property for 250 million. That is music to their ears. So are you telling me that if I upgrade the quality of this material, it will impress users? Because you are the ones that know what users experience in terms of long-term cost implications. If you can remove that by encouraging the developer to increase or change a certain material, and you can show the numbers and say, look, you can sell this property for 250 million instead of 200 million. Just spend this extra 5-10 million, using this and that options. Those projections make sense to them. How do you think all these smart buildings started coming up in the system? Just because some people were able to sell it to them and say, look, you know what, just put some things that makes curtains to go off and on, clap on for lights. Do you know how much those things cost? Peanuts. But the property will be selling for as much as 650 million naira for a flat or duplex in a highbrow place because he made it smart by investing maybe $2,500 in gadgets into that space, which is really peanuts compared to how much he's trying to sell the property for. So bottom line here is we need to know how to use numbers and analysis to convince them to follow our path of durability and sustainability. All right, thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing you again next week, Thursday. Bye-bye.